You're a minute early.
All right, good evening. I would like to call this meeting to order. It is November 8th at 6 p.m. And is there any public comment on tonight's agenda?
There is no public comment.
Okay, then I will turn it over to Mrs. Grigaitis.
Thank you very much. Good evening, everyone, and welcome to our November 8th meeting. This evening, we are going to, Mr. Bogley, if you could move to the agenda, that would be great. We are going to discuss for you some beginning of the year data, some comparative data. We are also going to share with the board our average class size ranges. We have some DEI updates to share. And we will end with some lesson planning guidelines that we have updated. Page 3 would be great, Mr. Bogley. Oh,
What's that?
you got it, great. So each year schools work collaboratively to write school improvement plans to help focus actions based on data to promote growth and achievement. Planning this year was centered on 3 goals. They are listed there above. As typical, they were asked to gather, analyze, review data on student progress systematically to adjust instruction, promote achievement and growth in all courses, all grades. We also, this year, are focusing on providing additional learning opportunities for students that are not reaching our expectations. We were asked schools to develop culturally supportive, inclusive, and equitable learning environments that ensure high expectations of all students, building that trust, encouraging collaboration, and improving communication to create that respectful atmosphere. And we ask schools to ensure that students own their own learning, understand their progress within their content, and can explain the learning objectives and what they need to do in order to improve their learning. This evening, we are here to share with you some beginning of the year data, and more importantly, the supports that we have for our students that may need it, and enrichment opportunities for those that would also benefit.
So we're going to take some time as we move forward through our presentation to speak to you about multiple data points that we have that help us to determine where our school improvement plans are going to go. And you'll see that that's also dependent upon the grade level of students and the content areas. There's a broad range of data ranging from national assessments, such as your AP scores, your SAT, ACT, and NOCTI, and then our state assessments, which we're all familiar with, our PSSA and Keystone, which determines our Future Ready Index. We also, at the district level, develop our own assessments, which we track and monitor based upon specific standards, and this helps us to direct where our instructional needs are to best support our students. This also will help us with certain things, pieces of remediation, and we have additional remediation tools that track data, such as Study Island, Lexia, Dreambox, and you'll hear a little bit more about those this evening as we move forward. But we're not just interested in achievement of students, but also the whole child and their social emotional learning. For that, we have additional pieces of data that we look at, such as their discipline, their behavior records, when they come to school and their attendance. And also we have various climate surveys that we put out throughout the year to take the pulse of our students. And then the tools in which we use to gather the data itself, one of our primary tools is a source that we integrated about 4 years ago called Linkit, that we track everything in, and that runs some really great diagnostic results for us to determine where our students have the greatest need or where we can actually further enrich them. Our Power School, where we keep all of our attendance and the courses that students have taken. Profile sheets, our PVOS, which helps us to determine our student growth. And then, of course, the PDE's Future Ready Index, as we're using to determine our strategic plan as a district moving forward. So some additional programmatic supports that we are able to develop from these data points that we have are our school improvement plans, GAIN, specifically focusing at the K-5 level, which you might have received letters for certain students to help determine the groups that they'll be in, whether it's for enrichment or for their own focusing on areas of struggle. We have bonus block at the high school where students can select to go to a specific area where they might have a need at that given time. We have learning time at the middle school for students to help support them there. And we have before and after school programs, as well as our summer school programs that we've offered this summer and mentoring at various grade levels. But in addition to what we support our students with, we also support our teachers. So you'll see that there's a various array of professional learning. And specifically this year, we've been focusing on those areas highlighted. So ranging from diversity, equity, inclusion initiatives to our curriculum cycle and making sure that what is taught is current. And also we are updating to be in compliance with PDE's teacher evaluation. So we've updated our learning plan guidelines, as well as additional supports for such as courageous conversations and culturally linguistic responsive teaching that we've just recently offered in our past 2 PDs this year. Now we're going to move on to the data summary, and we're going to review Plymouth White Marsh High School first, and we'll go in sequence of starting at the higher level, starting at secondary, moving our way down to elementary. Dr. Picani.
Thank you, Mrs. Wolochek. Today, our team is going to present information on advanced placement, data, courses, as well as benchmark assessments and the supports that we're offering at Plymouth White Marsh High School. As you can see here, we're proud of the comprehensive high school that we're offering for our students. 28 AP courses that we offer our students, a variety of rigorous course offerings, as you can see here. Just paints the picture of what we're offering our students pre-COVID as well as during the pandemic. In addition to that, many highlights, including Female Diversity Award recently in computer science, as well as we're proud of one of 15 high schools piloting an AP engineering curriculum accredited by the E4 USA. In addition to that, we're proud of all of our AP scholars in the past, over 1,000 of them in the last 12 years, as well as over 300 AP scholars in the last several years. So many opportunities for our students to participate in rigorous course offerings at Plymouth White Marsh. As you can see here, it's not a 5-year trend, but a 7-year trend. As we transitioned to the 5-block schedule several years ago, it provided that opportunity for our students really to enroll in multiple courses in addition to the graduation required courses. As you can see, there was an uptick starting in 2015, right around 290. It was in the 200s for many years before 15 hit and 16 hit. As you can see there, 338 students were enrolled, total students, in AP courses in the 2021 school year. Great. If you take a look at, thank you, Drew. The next slide there, sorry about that. I had to make sure my computer was aligned there. 597 exams, that's 338 students were enrolled in 597 classes, AP classes, and took 597 exams. So again, an uptick from 2015, students taking multiple AP courses in our school, and we're offering that for all of them, and they're really taking advantage of it. As you can see here, a 10 to 15% increase starting in 2015, which we're really proud of. Speaking of pride, I'm going to turn over to Mr. Price to highlight a lot of our accomplishments by our AP scholars.
Thank you, Dr. Picani. As just mentioned, AP scholars annually. This is a 5-year trend looking back at some of our AP scholars, and you can see the designation there on the left-hand side. But what that basically tells us is their overall score plus 3 or more exams that a student took. So every student outlined in this table here took at least 3 or more exams and then scored at a certain level, as mentioned on the left-hand side. Annually, each year for the last 5, we've had over 100 students be ranked as an AP scholar, which we're very proud of.
Thank you, Mr. Price. If you take a look at what we're looking at, we've continued to look at as a building are 2 focus areas. Number 1 is increasing participation in rigorous course offerings. That's honors courses, AP courses, as well as dual enrollment. Research indicates students that are enrolled in rigorous courses, there's a connection between that as well as post-secondary success and enrollment. So we want to continue to increase participation and access in rigorous courses at our building. In addition to that, and we'll talk about some of the strategies that we're employing and we continue to employ, is increasing the access to AP courses for underrepresented students while simultaneously maintaining or increasing the percentage of students that score 3 or above on one of the AP exams. So taking a look at a few action steps, and these are steps that we continue to employ. We employ with our counselors as well as our families is number one, taking a look at data points. 2 in particular. Number 1 is PVOS, as Mrs. Wilczek mentioned earlier, projection reports of students that will demonstrate success on AP exams. And we look at that for disaggregated groups and underrepresented students overall, as well as the College Board reports, which they release and we analyze to ensure our students are enrolled in rigorous course offerings. Mr. Price is going to go over 2 other action steps that we are going to employ and continue to employ at PW.
Thank you again, Dr. Bacani. We do implement annually, obviously, course selection beginning in 8th grade. 8th graders start in January through the process. We ask students to take a look through career exploration strategies and activities and classes that they do take to start planning out what they think their lives may look like after they leave Plymouth White Marsh High School. Using this, we have a sophomore spotlight, which was implemented with counselors, where parents and students are able to then, once at the high school, review their course selection annually, having a very specific meeting with their counselors, reviewing that course selection that would have occurred at Colonial Middle or outside, having then taken 9th grade courses and then planning for their sophomore year. These 4-year plans are then also available for parents, students, teachers, and counselors so that everyone's on the same page in Naviance, and again, aligned to their post-secondary plans. Lastly, and specifically according to the AP, or looking at the AP exams and rigorous course selections that Dr. Bacani mentioned, we've implemented an AP form in collaboration with students and student groups, where students actually lead seminar options during bonus blocks with their teachers so that other students' perspective can come in and ask questions without just reading a course catalog and getting information from just a book themselves. So they have actual people to talk to who have gone through that experience. Back to Dr. Coney.
Just a note there, really looking forward to having students in person running the AP forms during bonus block. Looking forward to that this coming school year. In terms of our final action step, as Mrs. Grigaitis mentioned earlier, focus as a district goal are areas of school improvement. We're excited to have our teachers and department chairs and administrators and curriculum supervisors participating in 4 different strands of our school improvement teams this year. Number 1, student achievement, specifically setting goals in that area, teaching and learning in terms of student engagement, aligned with the district initiative as well as district work with DEI is having a diversity, equity, and inclusion strand. And then finally, the bigger picture 4-year planning, Mr. Price mentioned, is our college and career readiness subgroup that we have for SIT. Thank you.
Dr. Bacani, can I ask a question real quick?
Sure.
Thanks. So the drop off this year, is that pandemic related? And is it a factor of fewer kids being qualified to take AP coursework or fewer kids choosing to do the AP coursework? Do you know at this point?
I would say taking a look at our enrollment data, number 1, pre-COVID, it wasn't a prerequisite scenario. I think it was more decisions made by students as well as families not to enroll in AP courses. I do have to say, and I think that we've noticed with students in the building, there is a difference of that face-to-face type conversation that we're having and going to have with students in terms of the course selection. The virtual component was a little bit more challenging than it is having that face-to-face conversation with students in terms of course selection, something that we're very aware of and then we're planning for moving forward.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
You're welcome.
It's still over 7 years. It's the 2nd highest year of participation. So we continue to have those conversations. And one of the goals was to talk with students who are in honors classes and say, why don't you try to take 1 AP course when you're thinking about it? So those are the conversations the counselors are having and the principals are having with sophomores who they think could be successful in an advanced placement course. Are we seeing, Dr. Bacani, are we seeing, because we have more students in IB? We should just check with those students to make sure they're not taking an AP because they're an IB, or if they are, ask them why. So we can find out, because we're gonna have about 35 students in that's rigorous coursework too. So we should see if that's a cost.
No problem. Will do.
Just a question with respect to the AP students from this past graduating class, having taken those exams after a year of pandemic. Did you guys notice a difference in scores on average in each of those tests?
So we took a look at the data, and very proud of the results of our students and the instruction by our AP teachers. We did see a dip in two specific areas, one in art, which was a portfolio that the students had to submit, and the other was in the science area, AP physics, that we addressed individually as well as one of the AP math areas, AP calculus, which we addressed on the back end as well. But other than that, I think we were well above in all of the areas, the state average as well as the global average. And that was shared with our department chairs and each AP teacher. And despite the challenges, really proud of how they performed.
Absolutely. It's so challenging to take an AP course in general, let alone to do it not being face to face. So.
Okay, so good evening, everyone. Next, we're going to talk about some data and the assessments associated with that data. And before we do so, kind of just wanted to give a clear idea of types of assessments that we have and their purposes. So you can see we have 4 types of assessments listed here: diagnostic, formative, benchmark, and summative. We're primarily going to talk about benchmark and summative assessments this evening. And the one thing we want to make sure we were clear about is with a benchmark, with benchmark data, it's to show student growth over time. So you'll see that students will master a certain amount of content as we progress throughout the year. The benchmark tests students on content they have not been taught. So understand, when we look at the data, you're going to see some percentages and be like, oh no, but then it's beginning of the year. The benchmark the students are taking is based on content that the students would have all school year. Data on the information allows teachers to make informed instructional decisions, enabling them to identify on topics students know the least about, so we can make sure we focus our time and budget our time correctly. It also shows teachers to identify students' need to provide them the appropriate supports, such as that, what we have in our elementary classes, such as GAIN. And historically, when we go to look at the benchmark data, understand that our benchmark B data correlate very well with our PSSA results. All right, so if you could go to the next slide.
Sorry about that, Ed.
It's all right. There we go. So here we're going to start off with Plymouth White Marsh High School data. And we don't have, what we're going to show here is the assessments that are used to determine needs. And we've have examples of summative data. This is not benchmark data in the high school. And I'll start off with our 10th grade integrated math 3 midterm. And the purpose of looking at this data is to show you 2 things. One, the consistency, and we do see some increases over the years. And to say that you'll notice that there's not a 2021 year. And the reason that that year is missing is because that was during our closure. And we looked at alternate forms of assessing that subject area for the midterm that school year.
One of the additional assessment types that you'll see on there is the benchmark. And so we have an English 3 benchmark listed there. And to note, it's 2018-19 all the way through 2020-21. And again, bearing in mind that the benchmark is an assessment of the content from year beginning to year end, this is really the best way of determining the needs that students have in reading and writing competencies in particular. 2021, to draw your attention to it, is simply a consequence of the environment that students were taking the assessment in. This is typically an in-person assessment, which we've returned to this year. And we're anticipating that we will see scores be in line with the 2018-19 and 2019-20 school year, as opposed to the previous year due to pandemic circumstances.
And lastly, for this slide, I'm going to share with you our academic biology Unit 1 assessment. So this is a local assessment that we create here, and it's a summative of the first unit of biology. So you can see that we have consistently been giving this particular assessment. It's stored in Linkit. And our data, although it is slightly lower this particular school year, it has not drastically dipped all that much. And it is the first test that students had taken coming back for a full in-person year in science. So we are hopeful that our results for our next unit tests, which should probably be in another 2 weeks or so, will be fairly consistent as well. So we're keeping a close eye on that.
Excuse me, is that typically a 10th grade test? or-
Ninth grade course.
It's a ninth grade.
It's a ninth
course.
grade course, and similarly to with math, it's a local assessment. So we're creating it ourselves. It is not a benchmark. So we're only testing them on what they've learned up to that point.
Right.
Because in science, if we gave them a benchmark, we would be looking at earth and space science. We would be looking at, environment, with all the different areas. So science is a little bit different than the other areas because we're focusing just on biology in that keystone specific year.
Gotcha. Okay, thanks.
You guys talk about what our staff then does with the data, so they get this information back, and we have, integrated math 3, 96% proficient and advanced. Talk about what, item analysis, how it steers teaching decisions, those types of things.
So when the teachers look at the results, they do kind of they'll highlight areas of success on the assessment, and then they'll look at areas of concern, and they'll look at those areas of concern and develop a plan as their PLT team, and that they'll go into classes, back to their classes with strategies to help remediate and bring those students back up to speed in those areas of concern.
And I can say each of the questions that's on those locally created assessments are linked to a specific standard, so that we can go back then and look at the data, and regardless of even student, we can see where we might have been struggling on a specific standard, so that if we have to go back and reteach a specific piece of content before moving on, we're able to do so. And then we can also identify specific students that might benefit from a remediation opportunity, or going during bonus block to getting some extra supports and help. And we can really customize the type of remediation that would be provided to them based upon what the results are from the specific data.
And Dr. Christian gave us a good lead in. Dr. Bacani and Mr. Price are also going to talk about some other supports that PW enlists based on that data.
Thank you. In addition to the strategies already mentioned, I know bonus block was thrown out there. We're looking to have that enrichment / remedial period for our students and staff, so their students are able to provide or sign up for a specific remedial session with a specific teacher, or an enrichment session with a specific teacher 5 days a week. So that's a great opportunity. Also provide lunch support with our math coach, a teacher as well, for students that need that type of support during that time. After school, we have extended learning time called ELT. We have 3 opportunities that we have peer tutors with. Number 1, our writing center with our writing fellows. We have National Honor Society students that serve as peer tutors and peer mentors, as well as our Avid tutorial. A lot of teamwork and collaboration in terms of our counselors meeting consistently to identify students that need either academic or social emotional support, IEP team collaboration, and as mentioned earlier, decisions made based upon PLT meetings. Then we'll change the classroom instructional strategies within the classroom, really focusing on 3 areas: formative assessment, differentiated instruction, and making accommodations based upon student needs. And Mr. Price, several social emotional supports.
Lastly, as Dr. Bacani mentioned, social emotional component, we know that the whole student is most important to us. Counselors, community counselors have a collaboration focusing on social and psychological challenges that students may have. Our care team meets bi-weekly to identify students in need, making referrals, setting up family meetings, working with them through the student assistance program, so that students can remain in school and advance academically based on barriers they're overcoming. And lastly, in regards to climate, we have a variety of student-led, student-involved opportunities. We know that involvement in clubs and activities really make the student well-rounded, but also socially connected. Students get to pick their own clubs, tying them to the school. The Anti-Defamation League, students involved in that, over 60 students have been trained to then roll out turnaround training to all students within Plymouth White Marsh High School. And then lastly, our DEI initiative, working with students to have discussions during bonus block, important conversations, helping students to navigate their lives with Mr. Gerald James here as a primary lead.
For the board, so the board knows, the care team is part of the student assistance program, and we have student assistance program in each of our schools. It's a requirement in the Commonwealth to have them at a minimum in all of your secondary schools, your middle schools and high schools, but we have student assistance programs, student assistance program teams throughout the district.
Can I ask you a question about bonus block? The, when they sign up for help in bonus block, is it face-to-face or are they doing that on Zoom?
Face-to-face. Yep, all of them.
All right, we're going to switch gears to the middle school at this point. And as a reminder, Mr. Merck spoke about this earlier. We are going to be looking at more benchmark data. So again, benchmark shows growth over time. When we are looking at beginning of the year and middle of the year benchmark data, we are looking at instruction that has not taken place yet. So we're assessing on end of the year standards, but they have not necessarily been taught yet. So we're going to be discussing ELA and math this evening, but if anybody would care to request any science data, we can share that as well. But in the sake of time, we decided to focus on ELA and math. Sorry, Mrs. Wilczek. Mr. Merck is going to start.
All right, so if we go to the next slide there. Okay, so what we're looking at here, what we're going to do is we're not going to go through every single data point for each grade level because we have all grades, 8th grade down to 2nd grade. What we're going to do is just kind of break it up. My job here for the 6th grade assessment results is just kind of describe what you're looking at here. So the columns make up our benchmark Form A, Lincoln Benchmark Form B, and our PSSA results for both ELA and math. You'll see that we have these results for 4 years. And for each of the last 4 years, we've identified on both the benchmarks and the PSSAs, just the percentage of students who are advanced and proficient, the percentage of students who are considered bubble on our benchmarks. I'll explain that in a second. And then the percentage of students who ended up being basic or below basic on each of those assessments. So you can see in our first row there for 18-19, you can look, when we took the benchmark tests for forms A and B, you can see the progression of the scores for the advanced proficient leading up to what we ended up scoring for PSSA that year for math. And you can also see the same thing for ELA. The students that are considered what are considered bubble students on the Lincoln assessments, Form A and B, those are students that could go, they could be either proficient on the PSSAs or they could end up being basic on the PSSAs. Our data information system, Linkit, has helped us identify those students based off trends on past assessments, past performance. And then they're able to say, these are the students you need to focus on. And we're able to easily group students and provide interventions and differentiate instruction accordingly based off those groups of students. If you look down, as you move down through the columns, you'll see areas that say NA, like in 1920. Well, that's because we did not take the PSSAs during the 1920 school year. For the 2021, you'll notice that you'll see TBD, to be determined. We did complete the PSSAs in the 2021 school year, but they have not been officially released by the state due to the testing window being extended all the way into the school year. So until all results are in and they do all the, number crunching on their end, that's when we'll officially release those results and say how we did. And then anything that's blank in the 21-22 school year, those are still assessments that we have to take.
So on the next slide for the seventh grade assessment results, what we'd be taking a look at there is exactly what we do with this data. So Ed had very succinctly described what exactly you're looking at. And then in turn, what we'll take a look at is highlighting comparisons and trends. So essentially what happens at this point is taking a look at year to year where we were, where we're going. We're trying to make certain determinations about how to adapt our instruction and make sure that we're differentiating for either acceleration or remediation of students that require assistance in those targeted skills. And again, these are all standards-based because they are tied directly and backwards mapped directly from the PSSA. So what we would be taking a look at is from point A to point B, where precisely were we scoring? So if we take a look at the seventh grade ELA, we can see in 18-19, 48% advanced and proficient to a 66%. And then eventually we have a 75% on the PSSA, which is a really strong correlation with the Form B that was administered the prior year. Now, again, as Mr. Merck had explained, in 1920 and 2021, we haven't either released data or we did not take the PSSAs in the 1920 school year. But essentially what we would be taking a look at are the students that are in two categories in particular, the advanced and proficient for our total number, and then the bubble students. And bubble students are essentially those students who are on the higher end that will eventually get to proficiency with a 10% margin of error, which means that all but 10% of those students that are identified throughout the course of the year on each of those Form A and Form Bs will become proficient in that benchmark. And we see that bear out year after year when we're taking a look at and analyzing the data for PSSA performance.
There it is. Okay, so the last slide we're going to look at for the middle school, the last set of data is the 8th grade data. And the data, and we can see similar trends with how students compare from the Form A benchmark to the Form B to the PSSA. The scores are different. And one thing we'd like to highlight on this 8th grade slide is, we understand that, especially for the 21-22 school year, we're seeing some discrepancies between math and ELA. And we're also seeing some low percentages for 21-22 in math. Now, again, go back to our definition of what a benchmark is. We are assessing the students on all grade 8 math data, but to reassure, that as the year progresses, we will improve their scores. Eventually, when we get to the PSSAs, if you look back at the 18-19, you see 60% advanced and proficient in math in 18-19 for math, and then 76% advanced proficient for 18-19 ELA. I wanted to make everyone aware that our state average for those years, the state average for math was 32.2% proficient or advanced. Our state average for ELA back in 18-19 was 57.9%. So you can see how Colonial compares to how the rest of the state performed. When we look at our county data, when we compare it to the county back in 18-19, the percent proficient was 52.5% compared, we were 60%. For ELA, 71.6% compared to our 76%. So we're expecting, similar, we're expecting that our numbers will be similar, but we'll always strive to do more. All right. And up next is Mrs. Collins will talk about CMS supports for students.
Just to go back a little bit too.
Sure.
The data is what it is, and we need to address, and our goal
Right.
is to raise the bar for all students.
Right.
It's been well documented for years that the 8th grade PSSA is one of the more rigorous tests, especially in math, that students in Pennsylvania take. And you can look at the Keystone scores for high schools across the Commonwealth, and we're included in that, where we have kids at the high school, when they reach that trigger course for the Keystone course, that we're above 90 percentile advanced and proficient. And the difference is that is a year-end course versus the 8th grade PSSA in math in particular is cumulative. Doesn't mean we can't do better. We absolutely can, but we're giving an assessment at the beginning of the year with all of the content. And so it's really important when we talk about what we do on the in-service days and how we prepare kids that we have targeted instruction so that they understand those math concepts. But that has been, and we tell the staff, we're not afraid of the data. We understand the era of accountability, but also on the other hand, in my 13 years doing this job and my job prior to that as a high school administrator and middle school administrator, I've yet to have a college ask me for a PSSA score or a Keystone score. So I certainly understand it's good for us for accountability, but there's more to assessing a child's progress than just one snapshot in time. Thanks, Mr. Martin.
Good evening. You will see that what we have up here for our supports are very similar and consistent with the high school. Every teacher uses the time at the end of the day, which is our learning time, to provide extra help and support to students that need it. We recently began supplemental tutoring as well, which is funded by our school improvement team and scheduled by individual teachers with struggling students after school. We continue to have our weekly SAP meetings to discuss struggling students and support necessary for success. Additionally, the guidance counselors meet regularly with the teams and individual teachers throughout the building to help put intervention plans in place for our instructional support process. We also continued with a modified activities program to provide students other outlets and enrichment experiences. Our math club is running and we continue to participate in Math Olympiad, Math Counts, and the PA Math League contest. We are running the CMS Scoop, Odyssey of the Mind, No Place for Hate, TSA, National Junior Honor Society, Student Council, and the music programs. Fall sports are in process of wrapping up and winter sports are slowly beginning with tryouts. We continue to support the students and families with the use of our learning management system, Canvas. We use it not only for instruction and assessment, but also as a means of communicating with the classes. Each grade has a page set up just for them where grade level announcements are shared and special activities and information and links can be found. We continue to use the high impact instructional strategies that have been in our plan for a few years. Incorporation of the John Collins retrieval routine, added routines, and differentiated instruction strategies. The goal is for integration of writing strategies in all grade levels. We also continue to use formative assessment, cooperative learning models, questioning strategies, and accommodations and interventions where necessary for all students. To address the social emotional needs of our students, the community counselors provide support. They have available calendars for students to schedule meetings independently if needed. They work with the teams to provide extra support and suggestions. They reach out to the families regularly to talk and listen, and they run groups when possible for various students. Mr. James has made himself available to our 8th grade students for open discussions and diversity chats. We've had our first few meetings a couple weeks ago with all the 8th grade students, and we're going to begin pushing into 6th grade learning time classrooms in person starting next week. We've been very busy at CMS trying to support our students and their families the best that we can.
Thank you very much. And before we transition to elementary, does anyone have any questions regarding CMS's data or any questions for CMS? Great. All right, and we now are going to transition to our elementary data.
Thank you, Mrs. Grigaitis. So the first component that we're going to take a look at is yet another benchmark. This one is called Dibbles. So Dibbles is the Dynamic Indicators of Basic Early Literacy Skills Assessment, and it measures a variety of different things. It is the first comprehensive tool that we have for grades K through 3. Those are the only students who participate in Dibbles at this time. What we take a look at in here are a variety of things. So we take a look at phonemic awareness, phonics, reading fluency, vocabulary, and reading comprehension. So each of these measures is cumulative year on year. So obviously the skills in kindergarten are going to be different than the focal skills that we have in 3rd grade. So for example, in kindergarten, what we would be taking a look at is correct letter sounds, which if you take a look up at the table in the upper left-hand corner, you'll see CLS there. That's what that stands for. In 1st grade, there's another 2 nifty acronyms with a hyphen in between. NWF stands for nonsense word fluency, and CLS is correct letter sounds again. So we're combining both of those when we move into 1st grade. Cumulatively moving into 2nd grade, we're combining that with WRC, or words read completely. And then 3rd grade is a total oral reading fluency. And that's where we're taking all of those component skills and putting them together. The test is designed to assess readiness for grade level reading and basic literacy skills. So what is expected of the student at that grade level? From that benchmark test, again, what we do is we adjust accordingly. This is where we start to introduce our game groups, which again is our intervention tool or intervention block that we have K through 5. So for K through 3, this is a remarkably important tool to sort students in an effective, meaningful way to ensure that their literacy skills are bolstered throughout. So reading teams will take a look at this with grade level teams, so our reading specialists in particular. They will meet with them, disaggregate the data, and they will talk about best instructional practices for each of those students, form instructional groupings for like students who have scored in appropriate categories, and move forward from there.
So next slide here is looking at grade 2 data, and there's just a couple of points we want to make when we progress through the grade levels. The first point is we do give students benchmarks all the way down in the grade 2 just to make sure we are checking for progress, mastery, and growth. The other point we'd like to make with on this slide, and that we'll probably continue to say as we move forward, is in the years 1920 and 2021, we did not give a link at Form C in either math or ELA. The reason we did not give that during those 2 years was we want to make sure we focused on instruction, both while the students were all at home and when students were returning last spring. And so when that's the reason why that data is blacked out. But when you look at the other data points, you'll notice that, there's obvious trends. We're looking for consistent Form A results from 1 year to the next, and we're looking for consistent growth from Form A to Form B as you compare those two.
And then moving into third grade in the following year, this is the first year where the PSSA assessment is administered to students. So you can see, much like we saw with the middle school, a very clear correlation between that Form B result that they took and the PSSA performance that they had on there. So those indicators are very strongly correlated with one another. And Mr. Mark explained why we have those boxes blacked out, but you'll also note in terms of third grade performance, it is remarkably strong year on year. This is something that we take great pride in as a district. We do know that our third grade team works tirelessly to ensure that our students are effectively placed in appropriate groupings to bolster those skills, as I had mentioned earlier, in terms of those administrations. Students would take Form C as well for third grade, but we thought it would be more relevant to show that Form B into the PSSA comparison.
Next slide there, Mr. Bogley. Fourth grade. Up to fourth, I'm sorry, fourth grade. So I thought we were on fifth. Just try to move us along. With this, when you're looking at this fourth grade and fifth grade, we're going to see, again, as in second and third, similar trends. And you will see as we progress through these grade levels, as you look from 18-19 to 2021, you could see like we're zeroing on our data more. I think we're looking at testing procedures, instructions for students, and that that environment. We're starting to zone in on the true results. And as we continue to refine how we're administering these assessments, we're going to see a more deeper correlation from the Form A to the Form B to the Form to what we would experience on the PSSAs. And that's what we're looking for in both fourth and fifth grades.
Can I ask a question on that data? Just
Sure.
So I understand it.
Are we on fifth grade?
Okay. Fourth grade. Okay, so if you're looking at 18-19 advanced and proficient, so A is 26%, B is 35%, but then PSSA jumps all the way up to 80%. So can you just explain like
there's a couple, yes, there's a couple, and that's why I'm saying as we move down through, what we're hoping for is to get it to have more of a correlation. What we're noticing there is there's a couple of different factors. One, timing of these Form B assessment. When was that given during the school year? That was back in 18-19. I don't recall then. It could also be testing procedures for students. Are they trying their best on every questions, even questions they're not even aware of because it hasn't been taught yet? Or, are they looking over that question and going to a question they know more, that they've been taught about? So as we refine that, you'll see a better correlation.
And Mrs. Epstein, you also want to keep in mind that bubble category. We had set it at all but about 10%, typically with good instruction and interventions in place will wind up being proficient.
just a lot to like take
It
in?
is
So
a
I'm just
lot.
trying to make sure I'm like catching it. Okay.
So Ms. Epstein, I promise this is the last table you'll have to look at. So for Form A and Form B, what you'll take a look at grade 5, where we're on the slide deck right now, so that's perfect. For 18-19, you'll see a comparable jump of 11% to 55%, and then 78%, which, by the way, trounces both the county and state averages for that year in 18-19. And we anticipate seeing similar projections for this current testing year. The other just final note, not to put too fine a point on it in terms of the difficulty of the assessment, as Dr. Christian had mentioned, the 8th grade math PS or 5th grade PSSA math, much like the 8th grade PSSA, is a challenging test. So to see that kind of strength is excellent. The difference primarily between that and the ELA PSSA that students would be taking is it's less cumulative in nature, right? We're looking at grade level reading skills and being able to scaffold those up appropriately with a strong foundation. So just wanted to point that out. We understand it's a lot of data, but we certainly wanted to review it and make sure that full transparency, everybody was able to see it, much like our instructors do, to make sure that our students are receiving what they need.
One of the strengths of our principals and our supervisors is when we have these conversations at the beginning of the year and we talk about their school improvement plans and Rosemary leads them through that process, is that it has to transfer from all this data to what are we doing in the classroom? Right. And what are the quality educational opportunities we are providing on a daily basis that help students grow, which includes varied assessments, which includes common assessments, item analysis, all of those things. How does it steer our decisions? And when we meet as a team, it always comes back to, well, what does that look like in the classroom? And that's critical because that's the transfer. That's what, the data is more for us so that we can make better decisions and that therefore our teachers make strong instructional decisions in the class.
I'm sorry, can I ask one more question? Sure. Okay. So I know that over the last few years, we've had some changes in programs that were added, like foundations and things like that. So in terms of that's how I see like when things are really changing is when we have like a new thing that we're doing. I don't remember what the first group of kids was with like some of those changes that we've made a few years ago to see where they are in these charts. And obviously we don't have all the data from say PSSAs from the last couple of years. So have you seen really good growth from say kindergarten to 3rd grade and transitioning to 4th grade with some of these other programs that we've started over the years?
So we have seen some excellent growth, but it's also been interrupted the past 2 years with that. So typically our foundations is the phonics direct explicit instruction, which you would see most likely impacted on 3rd grade PSSAs. So if you noted earlier, we spoke about how high our 3rd grade PSSAs are. If those students are confident in decoding and therefore comprehending the assessment, we're going to see higher scores. So we're looking forward to getting more assessment data so we can continue to follow that.
And then on the kids that are needing extra remediation with phonics and things like that, so the mask wearing, how are we able to help them when we're wearing masks and obviously hearing sound through the mask is a challenge as well?
100% great question. So our reading specialists and interventionists are working really hard with that. We also have shields that are available for our instructors and or students if they feel more comfortable wearing those.
Mrs. Grigaitis, if I could just add to that as well, a lot of instructors have also taken it upon themselves to film themselves in those lessons. So students also have asynchronous access to it, but they could show them those videos in class as well.
That's awesome to know. Thank you.
And Ms. Rock is going to share with us some other elementary supports that we do put in place for our students based on all this wonderful data.
Thank you, Mrs. Grigaitis. Good evening. Whew, today's flying by. I don't know if I'm the bistro or. Okay, so one of the things that we really pride ourselves in at the K-5 level is our gain block that we implemented 4 years ago. And I think when Mr. Passetti and Mr. Merck were talking about the growth that we saw in 18 and 19, I think it was because we were very strategic with our data and our gain grouping and constantly moving them and being fluid with that. And I think that the K-5 principals, administration, teachers have done a wonderful job with that. And we're continuing to look forward to do that. We started our gain groups here at the 4-5 building in the beginning of October. And then the K-3s, I think, started 2 weeks after that. So we're well on our way. Also that we've incorporated research-based interventions in our gain block time, which is great, which was not done prior. We have our student support team, which meets every other week. really looking at student data, looking at the whole student academically and behaviorally, other supports outside of school. We're looking to start our before school tutoring. It really works well with the elementary students before school rather than after school. We've seen a lot of success with that. Also technology clubs. So we do have a lot of technology, and sometimes at the K-3 level, they may not have access to the computers at home. So on Fridays, we're going to do like a K-5 blitz so that, you know, they can go into the tech lab, go into the library, spend that time doing Dreambox, Lexia, Reflex, iExcel. Let's see, the high impact class instructional strategies that we do as a district, formative assessment, cooperative learning. We also do, I think in the K-5 across the level, small group instruction in math, where typically small group instruction was really focused on guided reading. And so that is what my dissertation on is, guided math, which I really love the small group instruction for math. And I think the K-5 principals, administration has seen great success with that. So that's really good. The questioning techniques, differentiating while in the classroom, doing small groups and then in game, and then the different accommodations that we make for our students. So I know at the K-5 level, as well as the middle and high school, is the social emotional part. I think one thing that the K-5 principals have seen is that the kids are really happy to be back in school all the time. They really are. But we have our counselors, community counselor. We have a full guidance schedule that the counselors have began this week. We do our care meetings. We have our SAP. We also have our No Place for Drugs that are starting next week here on Monday at the 4-5. And then we do second step at the K-3. And then as far as our climate, we're continuing with our ADL training. We have different mentoring programs. We actually have a mentoring program here at the 4-5 building with district office staff, which is really nice. And we have our morning meetings, which are continuing on that we've done for years. And I'm not nervous. I'm just out of breath because I feel like it's sprinting. But thank you. So if you have any questions.
Any questions for elementary? I was not looking at you, Mrs. Epstein. I was just asking if anyone had any questions about the elementary data.
I actually will ask a question. And it's not as much about the data as it is about this, the slide that was just up, the elementary supports for students.
Sure.
So I know our teachers are amazing. How do you know that all of the teachers are doing all of the things that are on here? Because it's so much staff, there's so much going on. I'm just curious with the process of how, you know, not that the teachers necessarily asking about them being assessed doing it, but just curious how you know that each teacher is doing the things that we as a district are encouraging them to do.
So we do have data meetings set throughout the year. And that's where we really get the time, as Dr. Christian said, to delve into that data, to really parse out which students in my class need this, that, or the other. They also use their PLT time to really follow up with each other, and a lot of use their prep time for that as well. Principals and administrators, supervisors, we do walkthroughs throughout all the classrooms, offer any sort of assistance or help that they can, and then just generally being available for questions, because it is a lot. Superheroes. Yeah, sure.
Our youngest teachers, we started this a few years ago. Our youngest teachers are also intensely observed multiple times throughout the year. And then they're also, they receive obviously a mentor teacher when they come in too. And that really helps with pacing the curriculum throughout the year.
There's so much. we run a finely oiled machine here, you know, so how to make sure all the parts are still running, you know, so it's nice that there's so many supports available. So thank you. Kudos.
All right, so the next part of our presentations is briefly just to review our average class sizes across the district. Not much data here to look at, but you will notice our K-3, there's an average class range there, CES as well, and then moving up towards our secondary schools, PW High School, we have it spelled out with our core classes as well as our elective classes. It is a range. Depending on what those electives are, you may see more outliers.
Very appreciative of the board, as if the board remembers too, in August, I called everybody or emailed everybody and said, we have many kindergartners that had come in that in mid-August, and we added a section there. We also added a section in one of our schools, and I think it was second grade. And so the board has been very cognizant of that, of keeping class sizes lower, but also very interested in making them equitable among all of our buildings. So when the little guys kept coming, we're about 500 kindergartners this year. So they're taking over they're the littlest people, but the largest class.
And these numbers are before pullouts,
Before what?
before anybody gets pulled out of the classroom?
No, they do factor in some students who leave to go for direct instruction. in
Okay,
ELA and
okay.
math. The toughest classes at the secondary level are generally your advanced mathematics classes, because sometimes you get a really tough number like 90. And so do you have 3 sections, which is, we don't want 30, or do you have 4? So we try to avoid those. And then the AP courses can be tough on both ends, because sometimes you get 32, which is a tough number, or you only get 11, and say, okay, we want to run as many of the courses as we can. And your 28 AP courses, as Mr. Price and Dr. McConney know, those 28 courses, when you offer only 1 or 2 sections, that can steer where 500 other courses fall. So it's not uncommon when it's really kind of a labyrinth when they put, or a jigsaw puzzle when they put that schedule together. But those, those are averages. Those are consistent with what we have across the board for the most part.
Mr. Price, I hear it's pretty impressive to see you doing the whole man behind the curtain thing with respect to the scheduling. I'd love to be a fly on the wall
Team effort.
sometime and
Yes,
just watch
team effort.
your team.
He particularly likes meeting with me to review it.
That's one of our favorites for sure.
All right, and Mr. James is going to give us some updates since our last DEI meeting.
Thank you, Ms. Gregaitis. Good evening, everyone. All right, so we had our last DEI meeting was held on October 27th. It was a very engaging meeting. We did partake in a little bit of a shift from our traditional committee style format meetings, and really wanted to open up our meetings to allow more stakeholders to be really involved in our process. So we had a great presentation, more deliberation style and more engagement and thought and conversation. The work of the committee is still being done, but we wanted to really, again, take these opportunities to really engage with all of our stakeholders. During the meeting, we did have a brief presentation from our Human Resource Department that gave an update about diversity in our district, particularly new hires and continued efforts of the district to improve recruitment and retention of a diversified staff. We also had a great sharing out from all of our building liaisons. We shared some of the exciting things that they're doing in their respective building spaces, messages about National Hispanic Heritage Month, Disability Awareness Month, the ADL peer training that's taking place in high school, which is a great, wonderful program. I had the opportunity to go over and spend some time with the students that they were engaging in the training, and it's really fabulous. And I think that it's a great partnership with the ADL for our students. So really kudos to those professionals that will help champion those efforts. Participants also were allowed to engage in a reflective conversation and exercise centered around classroom discussions about race and what educators should know. The participants got to hear from the voices of Black and Brown students from across the country. And one of the things that we did after we had that was we also heard from some of our own student voices, share outs that I had gathered from students in terms of meeting with them independently, some of the things that were done from survey results, some of the conversations that have taken place in our excellence and equity chats. So it was a great opportunity, and it was a great activity and exercise, and we want to continue to have more exercises like that at our diversity, equity, and inclusion meetings. As shared, our excellence and equity chats are off to a great start. They continue to take place in our middle and high school. Students sometimes I come in with topics, sometimes I allow students to share what they want to talk about, because that's really what it's about. Topics we discussed, just a few, are respect for others, appreciation of diversity, civil discourse and dialogue, and ableism. And again, some of those topics were actually determined and asked for by the students. In terms of our November professional development, we followed up from our August professional development with work with the ADL, courageous conversations for the middle and high school, and culturally and linguistically responsive learning and teaching with our K through 5. For courageous conversations, we learned how to hold space and really took a time to do an activity called listening circles and reminded all the educators that holding space can take place really at any time and does not have to be a really structured thing. Simply asking someone, how are you? Or how's things going? And just allowing the student to be able to speak their truth is an example of holding space for them. While we did discuss Glenn Singleton's book in our initial presentation or in August surrounding race, we also reminded that courageous conversations don't have to take place regarding race. They can take place about anything. And we wanted to make sure that that was really highlighted in this conversation with our teachers. For culturally and linguistically responsive teaching and learning, that was facilitated by Mr. Passetti and Kylie Phillips. It was a great thing. They reviewed concrete strategies for teachers to validate and affirm students' home languages through bridging towards academic vocabulary in all content areas. Teachers analyzed meaningful linguistically responsive strategies for incorporating read alouds as a practice for improving literacy for all learners. Educators also learned how to employ strategies for discerning and responding to culturally informed behaviors in the classroom versus misbehaviors in general. In terms of our continued partnerships, we want to begin to look to expand our partnerships with other universities. We've already started some of those conversations. And then we wanted to make sure we're not just including universities in our area, particularly our historically Black colleges and universities that are not in our area. We recognize that students go out of state oftentimes. We want to make sure that when they go out of state, that they think about when they graduate coming back to Colonial. We want to focus this because our teacher pipeline is diminishing. And we want to make sure that we're developing strategies that can help build that teacher pipeline as well as encourage students to go into the field of education. We've said it can be anything. We want to make sure that anything can be us. They can be a Dr. Christian, they can be a Dr. McConney, they can be any person that they choose to be, but we want to make sure that we're gearing them towards the field of education. And our next DEI meeting will be November 30th at 6 o'clock in the high school cafeteria. And again, we're welcoming all to join us. We want to again begin to have these great dialogues and with all of our stakeholders, and everyone can be a participant. This month, we'll also have our students will also be participating from some of our student clubs and organizations. They'll be at our meeting to be able to share some of the things from their perspective. And that's our DEI update.
Thank you, Mr. James. And our final agenda item this evening is our lesson plan guidelines. So as evidence tonight, we use data to drive our instruction. But that instruction starts first with a thoughtful plan created by our amazing teachers. In June of this year, 2021, PDE revised the rubric that our administrators use to evaluate our professional employees. All revisions included equity, inclusivity, and clarity for learning. Thank you, Drew. Mr. Merck led our master teachers in October in activity that then revised our lesson plan guidelines for our staff. All staff have been or will be introduced to the guidelines this month. And again, these will continue to be used as a guide when planning all of those future lessons. It is very similar to the critical components that we did have, but we took some of those guiding questions that PD supplied us with to think about equity, inclusivity, and diversity when we are planning our lessons. That's it. Anybody have any questions?
Mrs. Grigaitis, that's something that, since it came from the Department of Education, is that something the intermediate unit is helping with as far as trainings for all school districts? Or
So Act 13 was our trainings that all of our staff had earlier this year, in which they were all introduced to the rubric. So yes, the IU put out the training, we did the turnaround training, and all of our staff have had that training. And we're going to continue for our administrators to work on that throughout this year as well, to really dig into the component changes.
and it really seems to emphasize varied assessments and varied instructional strategies,
Correct,
which is really something that we've been doing for a long time.
ever.
Thank you.
Yep.
All right, is there any public comment?
There is no public comment from Zoom. Any from the public?
Any more board comments? No, I just want to thank everybody. This was a lot of information and really, really shows all the work that our teachers do day in and day out to move our kids forward. So thank you to all of you for presenting it, but really please take back to your staff that we really appreciate all the work they're doing for our kids. And with that, I will call this meeting to an end and then
What do you think? A
Five.
5-minute break?
5-minute break. That'd be great.
5-minute break?
Okay, thank you all.
Good evening, everyone. I'd like to call to order our Community Relations and Student Life Safety and Wellness Committee meeting to order for November 8th, 2021. We do ask for comments on the agenda. Any comments from the public on the
See
agenda?
no hands raised from the public
Okay,
and no
then
comments.
we are good to get rolling.
Good evening, everybody. We have today on today's agenda, we have a few items. The first thing is going to be our athletics overview, and Mr. Bretz is here to enlighten us. We're also going to give you an update on the project ACIT student testing, as well as an update on our mental health resources that was brought up at our last meeting, just to add some closure. So without further ado, I'm going to turn this over to Mr. Bretz.
Thank you, Mrs. Burke. Welcome. Good evening, everybody. Going to give you a kind of general overview of the athletic department at the high school. In the high school, the big thing this year, coming off of a year and a half of the pandemic, was the high school administration. We all agreed the big thing was to get kids back actively involved in athletics and student activities. And you can see the athletic numbers and club numbers that are posted on the board agenda as well. The goal is to try to get students back actively involved and being part of the educational process, the extension of the classroom. So the big goal this year was to try to keep kids involved or get them back out. If you look at the 2020 school year, we had a major dip in a lot of sports, especially in football. And we had a major dip in that. We only had 8 ninth graders or 9 ninth graders come out. So we combined them with the JV team last year. And this year we actually are up to 28 freshmen out. And one of the main reasons for that was the year and a half that we had the pandemic involvement was we did not have the chance to go down to the middle school to have those conversations with the middle school kids, with our high school coaches that go down to visit and have the conversations of how to come out and what the sports are all about and what the expectations are at the high school level. And part of that, the athletic mission or statement that we should stay for the high school is it is the essential component and an extension of the classroom that challenges and involves each student to achieve his or her best, pursuing competition excellence, and contributing team member and a responsible citizen provide various opportunities with quality facilities, resources, staff participation with parents, and a developing with this rich school community in the tradition of excellence when it comes to athletics and education. That also goes to the clubs and activities that we have as well with the fall production and the musical and all of those types of events that we have. And if you look at the club numbers that we have over 100 clubs that are involved, and the numbers did take a dip or they did not even participate last year because of COVID. So we are really trying hard as an administration to try to get everybody back involved as best we can. And we're seeing that social emotional component that we'd like to gather back. And part of the educational outcomes in the interscholastic education programs that we have is promoting learning, citizenship, sportsmanship, healthy lifestyles, and life skills that we want to come out of that. And then we're looking at the athletic programs. Is the athletic program goals is the varsity is to compete for league, district, and state titles. And the numbers that you have for fall participation has been broken down for the last 4 years. And is color coded by sport for what they've done with their record in the league and overall record. If they've qualified for districts, if they qualified states, if they have won a league title. which is denoted by with 3 asterisks and being highlighted in blue. And you can kind of see that we are competitive in most of the sports, but again, we have to build some of the programs back up, and working to find ways to integrate that with the overall program with the middle school as well. So that's something that we want to work on with the middle school. But if you look around the county, a lot of schools are really struggling to even keep JV teams or varsity teams for that matter. An example, we had a very close neighbor in Happer Horsham actually fold their football program for the rest of the school year at the varsity level and JV level. They didn't even have enough kids to finish the season. So I feel very proud and honored that we actually have students coming back out and being part of the programs and trying to build that success again. And that's part of it. So that's kind of the overview of the athletic department itself, and the mantra or the overall view of the athletic department of how we're going to go about things. When it comes to dealing with the coaches and things like that, we do have a preseason meeting every season, which I did provide, which is in board docs, I believe. An overview of that, of the things that we go over. We go over the school policies on bullying and those types of things, practice schedules, hazing and harassment, protocols if we are still in the pandemic, whatever that may look like. And I have to commend all the coaches, students, club advisors, everything for their work during and currently still during the pandemic to pull off athletics or clubs and activities or productions, whatever it may have been. I'm very proud of the students and very proud of the teachers, coaches, administrators, everybody involved, including the school board, for allowing us to try to pull those off for the students of this community. Part of that is a coach's code of conduct that we introduced this fall that is signed off on a Google form in my office, which is sent out to the coaches, part of their preseason coaches packet they have to do. And part of that is the cardiac and concussion protocol that they have to do in accordance with PIAA rules and regulations. They have to send a preseason meeting. They have to send a preseason coaches meeting with the league. They have to then go through a coaches meeting with me. They also have to have a state certification in order to coach, and they have 2 or 3 years to complete that. We actually have a program that has been approved by the state of Pennsylvania through an online service, Vector, that all the coaches can use to do that. It is a one-time coaching thing that they have to complete and upload. They all have a coaching profile on the PIAA website. You can go to the PIAA website and look up pretty much any coach you want in the state of Pennsylvania. And if they're a brand new coach, they have 3 years to complete it, and then they have to upload it. When we look at the season itself, practices and games, one of my goals is that I attend at least 20 to 30 minutes of practice once a week or twice a week if I can. If not, one of the assistant athletic directors gets there, that we can kind of provide some feedback or see what is going on, that we have for our end of the year coaches meeting or post-season meeting with our head coaches about their staff, about them, how things went, how didn't they go, and how can we improve for everything else. And then also their budgeted items that they want, like at the end of the year or end of the season meeting. Then we get to the playoffs. If they're a varsity coach, the goal is to make the playoffs and hopefully win a league title and be successful at the district level. This year we had volleyball, field hockey go out in the very first game, which was kind of disappointing to see. We kind of ran into the wrong teams with the seeding. Boys soccer made it to the second round, which was awesome. They actually upset Downingtown East in the first round. It was a very exciting game. And then kind of faulted in double overtime to PKs to Boyertown in the second round. And exciting that our football team is still rolling along to the second round of district playoffs Friday night against Upper Dublin at Wissahickon. So I'll give that the plug right now at 7 p.m. Our female golfer was very exciting to see her participate in the state tournament this year. Sadly, girls soccer cross country did not make district playoffs, and girls tennis again is mostly an individual sport. We had a couple girls compete in the league tournament in singles and in doubles. As part of that, the coaches at the end of the year must go to a league meeting to put up their nominations for all league, and then have an end of the year coaches meeting with all the league liaisons to kind of get that all under wraps. And then at the end, normally have a end of the year meeting, banquet, whatever you'd like to call it, social. Hopefully each team, and they each do something different. It is not set in stone by the athletic director or department or district of how you want to do that. And they kind of do each individual thing of the way they want to. And again, it's been very difficult the last year or so with COVID. We've had to be kind of creative. We've been socially distant in the cafeteria a lot of times, and bringing boxed dinners in or whatever the case may have been. Hopefully, moving forward, we can kind of get back to more of a normal thing. Mrs. Epstein was part of Friday night's football senior night that we had a kind of, apologize for a second, mask. Senior night 2 weeks ago, in the hurricane that we had here for the football game and the torrential rains, we decided to punt and we put it inside, which was very nice. And we did it in the West Gym. We live streamed it on YouTube on the sports channel. And all the banners were hung in the lobby, which they're still hanging there. So we're kind of toying with the idea of trying to maybe look at the winter sports and getting them done earlier this year and have them hanging in there the whole season for every sports team to kind of decorate and make it look a little bit, more inviting when you come in. So it was very nice to see. And a lot of the parents gave a lot of compliments, including the marching band that are still hanging down there with everybody. And volleyball came down, of course, because we didn't have enough room. But we're kind of coming up with some creative ideas of maybe looking at different ways of doing this. And I thought it was a very interesting idea that we came up with and quickly punted to acknowledge those marching band, cheerleaders, and football players that evening.
I thought it was great. I really did. The way they did it, and all the kids were on the sidelines, and but it wasn't just like the football players on the sides for the football team to walk through or the marching band. It was like all of them together. So, and they weren't just like, they were intermingled, and it was neat to see that in between the groups coming through with the seniors and their parents, the kids on the sides were all like chatting with each other. Like, it was just really nice, like, to see that, because they don't have the time on a Friday night to chat together. It was just really kind of cool how they all were like together.
So, and part of that then is when we get to the end of the season again, is we meet with the head coach, or I meet with the head coach. We do a coaching evaluation of them, and the assistant coaches as well. They sign off on it and it stays in my office. And then we talk about the budget for the following year or what the current year is. And there is also a uniform chart that we cycle uniforms every 5 years for the teams. So if volleyball was up for this year, which we ended up getting last year because of the pandemic and the supply chain, we had to kind of get it in earlier. So actually this year would be their first year of the new volleyball uniform. So 5 more years from then would be the new uniform. So that's kind of the example of how it kind of goes. Each sport has their cycle. Then we talk about the general budgeted items that they get on a yearly basis, which is kind of the balls, the general equipment that they need in terms of the PIAA requirements for the sport. When it comes to sneakers, sticks, gloves, bats, they're kind of on their own to kind of get that if they play baseball, considering baseball, a baseball bat's probably about $450 to $500 if you're getting a good one. And softball bats are probably about the same. So it's interesting. And a lot of times the kids want their own equipment anyway. Like lacrosse helmets, we do buy the lacrosse helmets, but some of the kids kind of gripe about the helmets that we get. They're not the greatest or the most upscale helmet, but it is a very high quality helmet that we do use. So
Do we provide, or do we make sure that the coaches let everybody, parents and kids, know that if they can't provide it, we will?
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Okay, because
Absolutely.
that's like
Hmm?
pretty hefty price tag on some of that stuff.
So example, Mrs. Moore, we do actually have like field hockey sticks. We do have like the goalie equipment we supply, but we do have spare equipment that we do buy extra. Most of the time, like example, baseball, one of the kids will let them use their bat, whatever, but we do try to buy 1 or 2 bats, but most of the time they don't even use them. And it's kind of a waste of money to do that because they don't want to use that bat. I mean, if boys, when they come to the baseball, they want their own stuff. And
Yeah, I mean, and I know like a field hockey stick has to be the right side, like I couldn't use Kathy's field hockey stick very easily. No, you couldn't use, no, you'd be like bent over. But so we do provide what.
And if the
people
coach
need.
does come to me, like I do have a very good relationship with our suppliers that are quick to get me stuff. Like example, the goalies, we didn't have goalie equipment for girls lacrosse coming up because a couple of the girls are shorter. So we got to get some small instead of large. And it's been really quick. As much as it's been very difficult, they're very good with me for the most part. Bless you. So overall, we've been able to manage it. But again, it's becoming more and more difficult with the supply chain issues that we're currently having. But overall, we'll manage anything that comes our way. And if a coach comes to me, I'll take care of it.
Along the lines, same lines as her question, I guess one of the ways that we kind of can see if a family has financial difficulties is if they're on free or reduced lunch. Do you guys have like a list? So if a kid signs
By
up.
law, that's highly confidential, so only.
Okay, so you can't do that?
Mr. Bretz wouldn't have
Okay.
access to it. But if we believe that we have a family in need, we do have avenues to identify it, but only Lori McCoy and Mr. Soblowski have access to that information.
I was just curious because sometimes like the kids might just not be embarrassed to ask or something like that. And so I, didn't know.
Our coaches are very good about having discrete conversations with Mr. Bretz if they need something, and we make sure that every student athlete has what he or she needs. Those personal items, obviously can, students often want to get their own, but we make sure everybody has the equipment he or she needs because we want as many students to participate as possible. I think it's
Well,
really.
to Mrs. Epstein's point, though, I wonder, are there things that we could be doing to make these sports more accessible? Because particularly you get to the high school level, if you haven't had access to resources to play in a private club or league, you may not think that you can even try out for some of these teams. So are we making outreach so that kids know that, we have all the equipment, and not so much even just the kids, but the parents, that, we don't just have the equipment, but we also perhaps have some additional instructional or developmental activities that would help kids maybe who are newer to a sport or, joining a sport that requires a little more equipment. For example, field hockey from soccer or something, or lacrosse, so that those things aren't barriers.
We certainly can. I know we do have multiple, like, for example, when we go to the middle school and the varsity coaches talk with the kids, where we want kids to come to the high school and participate. And I know they have organizational meetings prior to each season getting started to develop interest from the student body. But we can put together a list of different things that we do to help recruit more involvement.
And perhaps when they go to the middle school to recruit, if each coach is just reminded to make it clear that please don't refrain from participating or coming out because of equipment needs, that, we'll help out anybody that needs it, just so that,
Yep.
They go home and say, well, I'm going to need this, this, and this. And a parent could say, yeah, forget it. We can't do that.
Absolutely. We can make sure
Thanks.
we'll kind of come up with a statement that they can provide when they go
That'd
down
be
there as
great.
well.
Thank you.
But to Mrs. Becker's point, we do have intramurals at the high school for basketball that the 2 basketball coaches run for intramurals. We do have the weightlifting after school twice a week. So are there a couple things that we can get kind of kids involved? And then If they find their niche of what sport they're involved in or like, they might join on to the off-season workouts. Like example, right now, boys lacrosse is in there working out in the weight room. Track and field is in the weight room working out. So if they're in there and they kind of start talking to the coach, they might become part of that program or team as well. We also have the access to Canvas pages, which we put everything up to the class of whatever it is, with the physical forms, the dates that things are starting, what sports are offered. And then on the pwathletics.org website, that is redirected to you from the Colonial District website, which has everything on there with the coach's contact information for fall, winter, and spring. And currently, right now, we are doing the thing with Miss Lester with the college signings. We've kind of come up with a new way of doing that with the Google form and everything. So we're kind of working on the National Signing Day with that as well. So we're building the technology within the athletic department to kind of make sure we cover every little aspect of that. So that's kind of the way the budget goes. And I know one of the questions was the budget versus fundraiser money. Fundraising money is usually for like the senior night gifts that they give to the seniors, the senior banquet night thing that they do for the seniors, the photos that they put up on the wall, the decorations they do for senior night, gear for the teams if they're going to fundraise for gear for the teams, like sweats or whatever, that they kind of look nice together, whatever they're going to do, travel together. End of the season banquets or gatherings, whatever it may be, if they're going to give awards, whatever those awards may be. Extra training in the off season. I know some of the teams pay for personal trainer to come in and work out with them like once a week. So that's kind of get different people in there to kind of motivate them instead of listening to the same person all the time. Kind of gets boring sometimes. Indoor, outdoor facilities, meaning example, baseball in the winter kind of goes off their offsite facility to take some hitting. So they grab a cage or two, like once a week for an hour or two, and they kind of hit. And then other teams go out there as well, or they're in winter leagues or spring leagues or fall leagues that they pay the fees for that from the fundraising that they do, because that is all off-season stuff and it's out of season in accordance with PIAA. Technically, that's not something that I can take care of because it's out of season. And then if they go away, team meals sometimes, or team gatherings that they do when they're out and about with those types of things. So that's kind of the general overview of the athletic department and activities. I try to put as much time as I can into the activities as well, because they are a major part of the high school and a major part of the culture at the high school. Now, I spend a lot of time with the fall production, and I'm excited for them to be able to pull that off this coming weekend. So we're pretty excited to pull that off coming up this weekend. So if you have any questions, I'll gladly try to answer them.
So you read the mission statement or vision statement. I don't see it on our website.
So we're in the process of making a coach's handbook, which I think I said was one of my goals for this year.
Okay.
So that is.
I would love to have that on there because it sounded great. Yes, love it.
So we're working on that. I want to get that up to, for review for everybody, but I'm trying to make sure it is all inclusive. So
Sure.
With all the board policies in regards to sexual harassment, all that type of stuff, that is in one place that the coaches can find it. Currently, it's like all scattered all over the place, and I got to kind of like get it together for them to look at.
Yeah, but I'm just saying on our website so that when I look up PW Athletics and I go to the page, it tells me what the mission of our sports
Absolutely.
teams are. So not necessarily for the coaches packet, but for our public, members of our public, parents, community members. So that would be great. One of the things that and I was hoping the spreadsheet was, but and then maybe this is something that would need to come up at a finance meeting, but I want to see what our budgets are per team and what they're spending every year. I want to make sure we're Title IX compliant on the amount of money that we're providing for each of these teams. And I also am curious who regulates the fundraising, because I did 3 separate fundraising things for my daughter's team. And I 100% trust the coach. This has nothing to do with that, but just curious, is it just the coaches do that and then it's on them to do that? Is there any, any oversight from the district that goes with that? Again, I'm not implying anything shady's going on, but it can be significant, the amount of money that we raise. So those were some things. I mean, Title IX, a big thing. And then just sort of seeing, where the budgets fall in line with regard to those types of things. That's
We,
sort of what
we
I'm
can put
curious.
that information together.
Okay, and like I said, maybe that's more of a finance committee
Yep,
meeting thing,
Mr. Sadlowski and Mr. Bretts can work on that.
Yeah.
And we have it all detailed in RJ's budget and
Sure.
we can absolutely talk about how to regulate fundraising. That's a sticky wicket in a lot of school districts, without a doubt.
Yeah, and I understand that it's extremely important, and that's how the teams can have the cool stuff. So I want to continue to encourage the fundraising. I just want to make sure that, some teams, I mean, if all teams are budgeted the same amount, then it is what it is, but maybe some sports are more expensive than other sports. So are we treating sports fairly? Because this sport may have more equipment because they have 50 kids on a team. And this sport has 7 kids on a team. Are they really at the same budget kind of thing? So that would be super interesting for me to see. And my last thought was, and I understand us trying to get more student athletes participating last year and this year. It has not been normal life. And so I'm happy that we're getting more involvement. But I also liked to hear that you said that we're competing for titles. It builds the camaraderie of a school to be able to say, we have these championships and we're going into the playoffs and banners in the gym and out on the fields and stuff like that. So, finding that balance of making sure our students who want to participate can, but also continuing to build programs and make sure this is a competitive school. So I know we have intramurals. I don't know if there's a way to build up other intramural opportunities so that if we have to cut people, they still have opportunities. That's also staffing. I get that. But I just want to make sure that, we're playing to win and also having opportunities for everybody who wants to play at some level. So it sounds like that's what we are doing. And so I appreciate that very much. So I appreciate all the information you shared.
Absolutely.
Thank you, Mr. Bretts. Mrs. Burke?
The next item on the agenda is the Project ACIT student testing. As you know, we have been testing staff members using Project ACIT tests that have been provided to us by the county. Under the guidance and direction of Montgomery County Office of Public Health, we are exploring the possibility of testing using Test to Stay. So Test to Stay is a COVID prevention strategy that will allow our students who are identified as close contacts to a case of COVID continue to attend school and participate in extracurricular activities in what they call a modified quarantine for 7 days after their last exposure. So per the guidelines that were set forth by the Office of Public Health in cooperation with CHOP, Children's Hospital of Philadelphia, and the CDC, this would allow students to participate and be able to remain in school and participate in extracurricular activities over the 7-day quarantine period, as long as they do the following things. They would have to opt in to completing an antigen testing cadence or schedule. They'd have to remain symptom-free, and they'd have to test negative to stay in this quarantine. So the way it works is that students should receive their initial antigen testing within 24 hours of being notified that they were exposed. And then they'd have additional testing every other day for the 7-day quarantine period. So they must receive a minimum of 1 test between days 5 and 7 in order for them to return on day 8. Now, if the school's not in session during that time period, then they have to receive their final testing on the next school day. But if the next school day turns out to be close to day 10, then they don't need any testing because the 10-day period is sufficient as long as they remain symptom-free. So the students will not be able to participate in the test to stay if they test positive, if they become symptomatic, or if they're exposed outside of school. So this is for in-school exposure on the buses, for example, which is what is causing a lot of our kids to be excluded from school. In those cases, if they test positive, or if they become symptomatic, or if they're exposed, then the students would need to be isolated and sent home. So that's what the parameters are. I know that Dr. Christian, nurse Jen Sexton from the high school, who is our COVID guru, and I will be meeting to go over what this will look like and what staffing will look like for this. I know that we have posted for positions for antigen testers in our schools so that they can be trained and test the students. Our nurses right now are just stretched to the max, working with students who are ill or who have been exposed and are presenting with symptoms. So we're hopeful that we'll have people in line to help us with this project. Dr. Christian, is there something you wanted to add to that?
Sure, just so everybody, the board knows, this is a couple steps have to happen before we can implement this. Number one, we're already approved to provide rapid antigen testing for our employees through Project ACIT. So we've submitted a request to expand it to include students. So that implementation plan has to be approved by the Office of Public Health and CHOP. Secondly, then we need to do a presentation, and that will be at the next board meeting next Thursday, as well as inform our community if the board approves it, inform the community of what the process is. It will involve heavy communication and obviously parent and guardian consent.
Yeah.
The goal of this is to hopefully mitigate some of the challenges we're experiencing, in particular to the students who've had to quarantine who are on a bus in close proximity to a positive case. We don't have the latitude to say that you were masked like we did in the classroom and 3 feet apart. If you're on the bus within 6 feet for 15 minutes or more, you must quarantine. And that's where the most of our cases are. So it's for students who are asymptomatic, who may have been exposed to a close contact, and they can take the rapid test. And if they're negative, they can stay in school, which is what we want.
Do we have assigned seats on the bus?
We do.
Okay.
Sometimes they don't always sit in them, but yeah, but we do. So, like I said, we have to get preliminary approval first. I want the board to approve it. So Karen and I will discuss it publicly next Thursday before the board votes. And then it's an option. If a parent wants, that would be traumatic. If I had my kids are older now, but if I have a first grader and I got called from the school and said, hey, listen, your child was exposed, but we can give them an antigen test. Well, a parent would probably want to be there, right? They may still go out and get their own. But the concept behind it is to take the test, whether it's on your own or provided by us, and then stay in school, especially if you're asymptomatic. If you obviously develop multiple symptoms, then you would be forced to quarantine regardless. I think with we still have a solid 6 weeks until all of our youngest learners are fully vaccinated. So we don't want kids missing school. And when we've had challenges, for example, Mrs. Rock, the principal upstairs, we had a week and a half in mid-October where it just seemed like we were getting cases every day on the buses. And we had a couple buses that had literally down to like 10 or 11 kids on them. So I think parents will appreciate it, but we certainly understand that it's going to require heavy communication. Parent consent is a must. And then and board approval. So we'll be I don't think it'll start probably until after Thanksgiving. But from the preliminary approval from OPH should be coming within a week or so. And all the administrators at central office have been trained to administer it. And then we are a couple districts in the county, including us, North Penn, we're actually hiring some people who can focus solely on being antigen testers, and they would work in conjunction with our nurses. We just couldn't put another thing on their plates. There's also confidentiality concerns, and we want to make sure that people's medical information is private. But the overall intent is to try to keep kids in school as much as possible. So we think it's worth pursuing. It's been called Test to Stay, and it's also called Modified Quarantine. So county just got approval to allow districts to do this a couple days ago. So we've been planning for it, and hopefully we can get it up and running in right after the holiday.
I have one question about that. So I know the nurses have a lot on their plate. Would the people that we hire to do the antigen testing be the ones to keep track of which days the kids got their follow-up tests? Not like who would be responsible for like following through with making sure all
Be a
the
combination of the principal of the building, the nurse, and the tester, the person who observes the testing. So there's going to be, this is not a small undertaking, and I never thought in my career we'd be doing something like this, but if it keeps kids in school, then that's what our job is, right? So
The intention is to have testing available at every school.
So we posted for 5 testers, and we're staggering their hours so that we can provide support in each school. So there'll be some overlap. And then, I think we can, since Conshohocken is so small, we can share with another school. And then actually in talking, we have a couple of relief nurses that we hired. We probably won't put somebody in the high school right now because so many of the students are vaccinated already. So we'll focus really on K-8.
And is the state providing the tests or do we buy them?
They are provided by CHOP and Project ACE IT. And so we have 8,000 tests to start, and they're over in my office. We actually only ordered 500 to start because we were working on employees only. But then I guess a 0 got added and a 3, and so we got a lot more. So, but they don't expire for quite some time. So I said, "Do you want them back?" And they said, "No, you just hold on to them." So if we're not approved for student implementation, we don't need it, we'll be able to return them so that we make sure they get put to use.
Mental health resources. I know that at prior meetings, it was recommended or requested that we make the mental health services or access to the mental health service information more readily available and transparent on our website. And I believe that we have done that. We have listed in the bottom of the front page, there is a square at the very bottom that says mental health. And it does direct people if you want more information, if you have questions about a student's behavior, academics, health, attendance, or drug and alcohol use, to check out the student assistance program. And you click there for more information, and it takes you right to the page where you can receive information about the student assistance program. We did want to make sure and emphasize that this is not a place to go if there's an emergency about your child. That's very important. So we do have disclaimers on there and directions for parents that if they feel that their child is in an emergency at this time and they need immediate help, to call 911 or to take your child to the closest local emergency room. So, but this is for information. If you click on it and put your name and contact information, your child's name, this is then directed immediately to the guidance office of your child's school, and your child's guidance counselor will get back to you. So I thank you for the suggestion. I think it's helpful. Chris, I know that you had brought that up numerous times. What are your thoughts about what exists?
Oh, I'm really pleased with it. One of my favorite things too with it is that when a parent can access that on their mobile phone or on their computer any time, day or night. So if they're like, in a crisis situation where they just want to like reach out, they just one place to do it and someone will get back to them. So they don't have to get into the phone system and get on hold and leave a voicemail. Like, it's just so quick and easy for that. I'm really excited to have that on there.
Yeah, and there are a number of links. If parents are to go up to the quick links, it's in the quick links. You can just curse down to mental health, click on that, and it will take you to the same page. If you go under any of the schools, it's on the left-hand side that says mental health. So there's a number of places, and I thank Kim Newell for the hard work that she went through to put this together in conjunction with Dr. Felix Scherzinger, who is our behavioral health advisor.
He's a pleasure to work with. So is Kim.
He
And
is.
so are you.
Aw. Okay, are there any questions about that? Okay, I'm turning back over to you. Back to you, Kathy.
Are there any public comments? Are there any board comments or questions? I guess the meeting is adjourned. Thank you very much.